Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Profluent Sports. I think we have now gotten basically every emerging league with the Snow League. So, Omar, appreciate you coming on and excited to dive into this one. It should be a good one.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Excited to be on.
Let's start here. Who are you? Give people some context. Obviously, you can read it in the bio, but just give us the quick rundown and then we'll get into the Snow League a little bit.
Yeah, well, actually, originally I was an electromechanical engineer at Stanford. And so the path to running the Snow League has been an interesting one. But I've built 4 companies from the ground up. So right after Stanford, I was at a robotics company. We built that, sold that. I went off to business school, went off to the Boston Consulting Group for a few years after business school because I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur my whole life. And then started an ad tech company. And then I parlayed that into starting something I was really passionate about, which was sports and education. I combined those two things and I started a sports content company similar to Masterclass, but focused on sports. So I had Michael Phelps teaching swimming, Megan Rapinoe teaching soccer, and that's where I met Shaun. We had him teaching snowboarding. And then a few years ago, about 2 years ago, we put all that content on NBC's youth sports platform. And Shaun he was retiring, he was having this vision about developing this league around the world for snowboarding and free skiing. We got together. He asked me if I wanted to run the league with him, and I did my diligence on it first. But then it's great opportunity. Obviously, not too many opportunities to work with the greatest of all time in their respective fields, and that's how the league started up. And the Snow League, there's kind of this opportunity where there were all these one-off events, free skiing, snowboarding events, half pipe, slopestyle, X Games, Dew Tour. Burton had the U.S. Opens, and he wanted to unify the sport. And there was this opportunity to kind of unify it because Burton had stopped doing the events around COVID, and we brought in a great COO who ran all of Burton's events. We are a touring model. The vision from Shaun is similar to building an F1 type model in the winter where we have amazing events, but we also have an amazing weekend around the event of culture and lifestyle and sport all mixed together.
Yeah, and it's super cool. You guys raised I'm not sure where you're at now. I've seen a few rounds. I think it was like your second round. But how did you approach that as well? Obviously, I see just through Profluence members, new leagues every day. And for every one, people are like, oh, I'm seeing so many more. I go, yeah, but for every one you see actually get some public funding and be able to really try to take a shot at this, there's 100 more that are trying. How did you think about that, piece of the journey? Obviously, you want to be building, but the fundraising is a big piece of it, and the partners and how you do it. So curious on that thought process.
Yeah, and I think I said this a few weeks ago at a conference. It's honestly, I think what you have to do is you have to analyze the business and you have to do your due diligence just like any business. The fact that it's kind of in sports and it's exciting, you need to have a way to commercialize it. You need to have a proven audience. You need to have the athletes. You need to have, be able to strike good media rights deals. So when we first came out to market, some of the investors they own sports leagues. They see what the TGL is doing. They see what PLL is doing. They own soccer teams. And so we really kind of had to do our groundwork to make sure that, hey, there is ingredients here for success. And one of the things I tell people is we do have these ingredients, and they were there prior to us starting the Snow League. We looked at historical audience numbers in the United States, outside of the United States, for events that happen in snowboarding and free skiing outside of the Olympics. I think there's always this, misconception that, oh, it's an Olympic sport, so people don't watch it outside the Olympics. Well, we looked at those numbers. People do watch it, outside the Olympics. And then we brought in people who understand the sponsorship side of the business. Like, what is it, what are sponsors looking for? We probably one of the most impactful pieces of it, analysis we did was around the market size for the number of skiers and snowboarders around the world. If you kind of look at where this sport takes place, it's global. You have about a third of the participants in North America. You've got a third in Europe, and you've got a third in Asia, but there's a scattering elsewhere. And so it's truly a global sport. You also happen to be twice the size of golf. So there's 66 million golfers. There's 125 million skiers and snowboarders. It's much bigger than lacrosse. It's maybe 50 times bigger than lacrosse. And it's the number one sport as far as household income in the world. And it's men and women, and it's 8 to 80 years old. And so you have all these people around the world participating in the sport, and we have a good audience. And so we're bringing, as a touring model, bringing this sport around the world. to China to Colorado to Switzerland and beyond. And it kind of starts to make sense. Okay, from a sponsorship perspective, from a commercialization perspective, that's an important audience to get in front of. It's the same audience that people are looking at if they're going to sponsor the US Open of tennis, or if they're going to sponsor F1 or Sail GP. So you kind of do your diligence on the market and the audience, and you will look at the media numbers, make sure you're going to have people. 3.5 million people watched our first event globally. When you then have your ace up your sleeve and Shaun, who is, the right person to kind of unify the sport, I think investors got very excited and they saw that this was every startup. I mean, we've done 4. Every startup is always a risk, but I think they saw that we had a lot of tailwinds behind us, and we had our data behind us to kind of indicate that this was going to be a good idea.
Yeah. And for you, what intrigued you about not just sports, but, taking on an emerging, property? Like you said, it's big, but you're basically building this from the ground up. What was the interest level for you being, and I'll just tie this together of like, hey, it's cool to see a lot more people come into sports to try to build and innovate. And I'm always just interested in like, why, what was the opportunity you saw? Okay, cool. You can tell me the numbers on, snowboarding or whatever. That's great. But what's also, for you personally, where you're like, of course, I'm sure it's monetary, but to some level, but it's also like, hey, this industry, why is this a good place, right? You're seeing this across so much of sports.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I'm lucky in that this is the 4th one I've done. So have the chance to pick and choose a little bit of where I wanted to go next. And I truly step back and say, well, I love the journey of it all. And I love building from zero. I mean, that's been since I was 5 years old. I started painting the addresses on curbs, in my neighborhood. And I would go out and I would charge $4. And I thought maybe people would give me 5. The reason I charged 4 is because I thought, hey, they probably have a $5 bill. And they'll say, yeah, forget the $1 back, just keep the 5. Turns out almost everyone wanted the dollar back. But like, that's always been exciting for me, is building from the ground up, because then you get to really infuse the culture of the league. And along the way, I've learned a lot of things, like working with the top athletes in the world. It's all about process. The end goal it's almost never something you pay attention to. I think Nick Saban famously says it for his football players in Alabama back in the day when he was coaching. He would say, I'm not worried about the scoreboard. It's just like, can we execute the next play? And for me, in an entrepreneurial setting, so much of that is the case. It's like, got 20 meetings today and tomorrow, and all of them are not the sort of big end goal, which is the events and the 3-4 days around it and how amazing that is. So you kind of have to love the building of the Legos. And oddly, I love puzzles. I love Legos. And I think that probably translates into why I was so interested in this. But the other obvious piece is I actually grew up skateboarding and snowboarding, and I played a lot of sports. But over the year, I ended up at Kellogg, where I went to business school. There were like 5 presidents of the ski and snowboard club, which is 1,000 people. And I was one of those. And that same kind of group of people I skied and snowboarded with, I've been doing it for 20 years straight. Every year we go. And so it's been a big part of my life. I've watched all these events. I watched Shaun. And so there is a part that, I'm very familiar with it. I love the sport. I love the culture around the sport. But building from the ground up is it's in my DNA, I suppose.
Yeah. And I want to go a little bit deeper on the one piece of that you were just talking about, putting the pieces together, and right, that there's a lot of similarities across building a business in any domain. Have you found anything unique or different about sports that has been surprising, encouraging, any different level? Because you often get people that, someone like yourself, come in and they go, well, there was like a few things that I just thought were interesting of how this worked or didn't work, or there's definitely some nuance to the industry as well.
Yeah, I think, let's talk about the similarities first. I think at the end of the day, it's like product market fit. I've actually used that term a lot because I think there are emerging leagues where you're sort of forcing a product into something that maybe people don't want, or it's just not gonna, if people, if the consumer doesn't want it at the end of the day, they don't want to watch it. It's you're as great as you can be at operating the business, you're kind of behind the 8 ball. So I think that's there. The other thing is, I firmly believe, I've talked to a bunch of the folks building the other leagues, and I think that there's a mentality that, you can't do what the NFL's doing at this stage. Clearly, you can't do the NBA. So you have to like start a playbook that really works for emerging leagues. And there's no one size fits all. But I will say that a diversity of viewpoints coming into the league. So, for example, with this league, or if I'm starting a fencing league, I don't want all fencers starting the league, because that is a very, like, that's a community that cares about fencing and they see it one way. And so as we built this league, we have a great operations team that knows exactly what to do on snow. They've been doing it for 20 plus years. And that's an area where you really want like that endemic domain expertise. But when it comes to partnerships, when it comes to media rights, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to finance, all these other pieces of the business, we're pulling people out of that have no business in sports. My CFO spent almost 2 decades at Meta growing WhatsApp and other and Instagram. And then we have teams that came from the NFL and cricket and other sports. And you just kind of the similarities, as we sort of started saying, across businesses. I actually think also that diversity of views is super important. But what surprised me, I would say, is, I mean, there is an aspect of PR that it kind of goes above and beyond a tech. Big tech has a lot of PR, but a smaller business you're doing with around insurance or collectibles or whatever it might be, you're not going to sort of have to deal with the global scope of the PR. And so we were just in Asia with Shaun, myself, and a small team, and lots of interviews with in China, lots of interviews in Japan, and that's just a piece of the puzzle that is, I think, pretty unique to sport and a few other industries as well. And it's an important part. It's a part that Shaun knows inside. And I mean, he's been in the public eye since he was, call it, 8 years old. So it's fun because I get to sort of watch him do it, and then the rest of our team can kind of take his lead as far as promoting the league on a global scale.
Yeah, no, super cool. And I agree with the PR. It's very much, I think it comes naturally in sports of like it's competition to some degree. Like you're used to one team winning, one team losing. And so like even when you look at leagues, people are like, it's like almost a competition and people want to take a side. And that's where the PR comes into it. And then everyone sort of starts to get behind one. And it's interesting, especially now in time, obviously, when some of the leagues started a long time ago. There wasn't much else out there. Now there's a lot of different competing angles, but something I want to do, if you're good to go through it real quick, we've been doing on a lot of the emerging leagues, is I just pull up a YouTube clip of one of your events, and then I just put up your upcoming. And if you just want to sort of talk through a few things real quickly, I think it's helpful just to give, obviously the listeners can hear through it, but a lot of people watch the clips or the video form. They like to see it go through. So if you're cool with that, I'm just going to share my screen real quick and we can go through the broadcast.
And by the way, while you're pulling that up real quick,
yeah,
the other thing that came to mind, the obvious difference between a sports league and those is the athletes. And that stakeholder group is like, and I have the fortunate experience of having worked with, we filmed 23 athletes from Justin Jefferson to all these big names. But at the end of the day, that group of people is, most people view them as, they see them on the TV, they see them doing the athletics, but there is so much more, behind their health and safety, their mental well-being, their travel schedule, and just, trying to build the league for them. So Shaun is such a piece of the puzzle when it comes to, how we kind of work with the athletes, and he's in the best position to do it. But I think that's the part about sports too, that the business side behind it to like really support the talent in your league, you don't see that aspect as much. So we can go into the video, but it's a critical part.
Yeah, I was going to go into the athlete side a little bit of like, what do you think the formula for emerging league? And you often find it's like, if you look on Unrivaled, it's like they're building a lot of athletes into their playbook, but still co-founded by two major WNBA players. And it's like Snow League, you see Shaun, like it's almost like to get some of these going, you need a legend. But anyway, yeah, we'll go through it. We don't have to go anything crazy, but if you just want to talk through a few points, show us what's going on. But here it looks like, and I'll let you take over, but here it looks like, so here's your broadcast. You got sponsors here.
Yeah. So up at the top here, this is the top of the half pipe, and our event is focused on half pipe to start. What's really important is that from a partner perspective, we have LEDs there so we can kind of display whatever we want. We can show our partners, we can show the athletes. There's a lot of good content right there. And this is kind of comes from my content background. All the talk, we mic'd up the athletes in a way that actually afterwards, we're on NBC in the United States, and we had a debrief with them afterwards, and they were asking, how did you mic them up to get the sound between the coaches? Because it's tricky. They're flipping 3 times. There's a lot of aerodynamics happening. So in this stage, we're filming a lot of the backstory
Yeah.
here. What's the coach saying? What's their heart? Hopefully over time you'll start to see more things like the biometrics and the heart
Yeah.
rate and all that data. But just like when you're watching an NFL game, you don't realize till you pay attention how many times they cut over to coaches
Oh
and the
yeah.
sidelines and get that sort of that story. It's not just about what's happening on the field. Now here,
I just want to throw one point. It's funny on that. One of my friends always calls it like the view of shame. Like you watch the NFL games, like someone makes a mistake, they always like zoom in and just like shame that person. But anyway, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, I feel you got to feel, especially when it's like a kicker or punter, someone that doesn't get the airtime
Right.
until it's only a view of shame.
Of
It's
course.
it's a, it's a it is a tough position to play in football. This is really interesting. So the traditional way that the sport is run, and it still is in the Olympics, you have, let's say, 10 people, they go through the half pipe 10 times, each one 3 times. And then the highest score ends up winning. So Shaun wanted to create head to head. And it's just like a traditional March Madness bracket. You have quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, and you have the athletes get seeded from the first day of qualifying. And then you have 1 versus 8. And the 1 seed and the 8 seed take a run down the half pipe. And the viewer now can look at the 2 runs back to back, and there's judges that give a score, but you can really start to debate yourself, oh, whose run was better. Whereas in the past, they're almost never back to back. So you might have a run from 90 minutes ago that has like a score of 93, and this person's going to the half pipe. They have to beat that run. Well, you have no frame of reference anymore. And
Right.
so the head to head, is amazing, and it's best of 3 runs. So if you and I are in the quarterfinals against each other, we go once, you win the first run, you got a point. I have to win the second run, or else you win 2-0 and you're on to the next. And our women's final came down to a third run, and the Japanese lady Sina beat the American Maddie by a half point in that third run. So this is WSL has kind of done this format, but it just makes it a lot more dramatic. There's upsets, you can root for people, and it's easier to sort of consume it and understand it.
Super cool. Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, right, at least here, this is just one quarterfinal lane, but mainly America, Japan, and South Korea.
Yeah.
Is that pretty heavy right now? Or is that what's sort of the demographic you've seen? Are a lot of the best athletes
Yeah.
American and like Japanese or South Korean, or what's the.
Yeah, we actually, so it varies by event. So you're looking at men's snowboarding right there. And men's snowboarding does have a lot of very strong Asian athletes in the field. But if you look across all 52 athletes in the league, from skiing to snowboarding, men's and women's, we have about a third of them from Asia, a third from North America, and a third from Europe. So in women's skiing,
Hmm.
for example, you won't see as many Asian athletes, or in men's skiing, it tends to be a bit more dominated by U.S. athletes. So it's a mix, which is amazing, and it just kind of goes to the globality of the sport. And I mean, I'd be remiss if I wasn't say Shaun and I and the league are incredibly proud that the men's and women's fields are both like amazingly competitive, and equal prize purse for men and women, equal prize purse between snowboarding and skiing. We really feel like as we built this league, we were trying to benefit all the athletes. Also, if you show up, you get paid something. And
Yeah.
that wasn't the case in a lot of events before. So you'd lose money unless you
Yeah.
podiumed at an event. So you can keep going, but we're really exciting to see kind of all those sports in the half pipe doing so well.
Yeah. And what are your, just because we won't go through this whole thing, but how are, or what are the different, how many different events? You don't have to go through all of them.
Yeah.
How many different like variations or sports do you foresee? Like, what are you at now? Where do you foresee that to?
Yeah, well, we made a very conscious decision to focus on half pipe to start. It's a natural amphitheater. It gets the most viewership. It's really, really kind of easy to consume and watch, and it's very exciting and competitive. So it is the most watched sport in the Winter Olympics. And we're starting there, men's and women's skiing and snowboarding. So effectively, we have 4 competitions
Okay.
per event we go to. Quarterfinals, semis, finals for each of those 4. And then we did one event in Aspen last winter, and this winter we have the Olympics. So we have one event before it in China in December, and then we have 2 events after the Olympics in Aspen, back again in Aspen, and then Switzerland at Locks. And that's going to comprise our first season. at which point we'll crown our first, champions at the end of the season. And then season 2 starts next winter. And our typical season is going to run from, let's say, early fall. We may do events in the Southern Hemisphere in,
Yep.
let's say, September timeframe, and then end in early spring. So the summer is our off season.
Nice. Super cool. Cool. All right. Maybe we'll go last through here so you can see some of what you're talking about. Like you have height meters, trying to get more data into it.
Yeah, one of the things there, if you just kind of, this was qualifying day, but if you see almost all the athletes, we started just with snowboarding, so skiing we're introducing in China
Okay.
in the second. Then every event from then on will have both. But right there, where they get to the interview spot and they're in front of that step and repeat, he's got his helmet on there. And it's one of the things we're working with the rider athletes is like, hey, let's remember, there you go. Put you, like, we want to see you. We want to we
Yeah.
want to learn more about you. And so Shaun is all about the content behind the scenes as well. That, there's great stories to be told in the league. And so, working with the athletes to share their stories, off the field, on the field, but then also just getting the goggles off, getting the helmets off, because we were just in Japan and the gold medalist Ayumu Hirano and Shaun were doing a bunch of interviews, and Ayumu's got dreads and he's just like a really cool looking guy. And when he's at the event, you'd have no idea who he was because he's just in the goggles and helmet. So little things like that, I think, really to figure out who are your favorite riders, who you're rooting for, who you're rooting against. It's really about storytelling for us.
Yeah. And then I guess at the end, like similar to a sports broadcast, you guys have commentators. You bring in the athletes to speak, or what's sort of the post game of that? Because obviously, honestly, if you look at like NFL, even NBA, it seems like most of the excitement and money is in all the pre and post game, and the game itself is like just cool, whatever. But
Yeah.
they last for
Well,
weeks.
yeah, honestly, and it even goes beyond the game, right? So when we think of an event, you come to any of our events, it's a whole 4 days. And I like to say like 25% of that might be the competition. But within the competition itself, you're right. We added Jack Collinsworth from NBC, who's Sunday Night Football, Chris Collinsworth's son, I
Yep.
believe, commentated. And it was amazing to have that because you could see him learning as he went the sport, and he was really excited. So we purposefully brought people in, and we did have that North Star of Sunday Night Football. So it costs a lot of money to make it look exactly like that, but you start to put in that, like, those things in place. We had a someone who was an analyst, like, when Gene Steratore comes on the
Right.
NFL
Right.
and he's like,
Best
they're
job in
talking
the
about,
world.
yeah. So we had this guy Connor, and he was our judging analyst, and he would start to talk about to the audience about the difference in the runs and what the judges may or may not be thinking. So you're right, there's a lot of that drama, and then of course integrating the athletes' stories into it. We had great sideline reporters and folks that kind of built stories before the event, during, and of course after. And I think that's one of the things here. We try to follow the athletes all year round, and that's the
Yeah.
new thing. I mean, each event before was just like one event a year, so now we have this opportunity to tell the story 365.
Yeah. No, that's huge. Now, from a business model perspective, similar to other leagues, I'm sure, and I don't know, like the media rights, those are usually like the golden, ticket at the end, or the goose, whatever you want to call it, right? Is
Yeah.
that sort of where you're working toward? And then, you're capturing different ways, or do you even think about it different of how you're building and these things are just the landscape's changing? Like how are you viewing, what are the different angles? Obviously sponsorship we saw all across, but
Yeah, I think it's one of the themes you'll hear from a lot of investors, and we agree with this, is it's really important to not rely on media rights right away. Like, they take time. You look at NWSL, you look at other leagues, you look at PLL, you usually start in one spot, and then you kind of, over time, as you build not just your but also the history of your audience, so that they can look back and the amount of events you have. All of a sudden, now you start kind of 5 years down the road, getting hopefully really significant media rights revenues coming in. I think one thing that's really nice about our league is it's truly global. So we were in about 100 countries, and we have media rights deals like across the world. And so our domestic deal, with NBC is one deal, but we also have deals in Latin America and Australia and Canada. And so media rights is something that is very important. And that viewership, if you can have the ability to build a business model where you can prioritize reach over revenue on the media rights side to start, then you start to really get the flywheel going, which is, both on linear and social digital. it applies to both. But you get the flywheel going where all of a sudden your partners are now like, oh my gosh, 10 million people watch this event worldwide. And oh, by the way, 10 million people watch it. So now you start to, over time you get your media rights, in place in different regions. But it's really nice. We built the league to ensure that, and our investors know there's a long-term vision. And because if you get stuck behind a paywall too early and you need to take, let's say, X dollars, you might not get seen and it might not build the league globally how you want. So I think kind of that reach early is important, and then the flywheel.
Yeah, it's super cool. And yeah, I appreciate you going through that. And then obviously the video with us, super cool to see it. I think people appreciate those just to have a visual alongside it. Outside of the events, like anything else you want to call out, or things you're working on, or future visions or plans or anything we haven't touched on. I think we've gone to most angles, but just want to leave it out there in case there's something on your mind that we get to.
Yeah, I think the last thing is, the Olympics are coming up this winter, and we're partnered with, here in the U.S. We're partnered with NBC, and they have a very exciting February. Right, they've got Super Bowl, they've got the Olympics, now the NBA, the All Star Game is that month, and then our Aspen event is at the end of February. So you can catch us on NBC in December with the China event, coming back to the U.S. and then in Switzerland after that. But it's just, the Olympics are an exciting time for the league. The world spotlight kind of will turn to Italy. Shaun's going to be heavily involved there, and we're really excited for the winter coming up. So yeah, obviously try to tune in and check the sport out if you haven't seen it. I think the formats and the way we're kind of throwing the content out there it's going to be really exciting to watch.
It is. And what's the best place for people to learn more or tune in, or just get, like, where do you view like your best top of funnel for education and just learning more than viewing? Is it YouTube? Is it your socials website? And then what is that?
Yeah. Check out YouTube. Check out our socials, Snow League, and if you we're putting a lot of information out there that kind of will help people like better understand the sport, whether it's data, whether it's storytelling, and then when you can watch us on Peacock streaming anytime essentially,
Okay.
so you can kind of go backwards and watch some of the previous events. But yeah, it's just check us out on the socials, and,
I love
and
it.
you'll learn more.
I love it. Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get all those links and stuff posted as well. So that's good. But yeah, Amar, appreciate you coming on, and love what you guys are doing. It's super cool. We'll have to follow the progress. I tell everyone it's cool to like get unrivaled from when they started to then we just had them on after their last raise. Like it's cool to for people to listen to them and in order, even from the building side, not like, hey, here's watch the league and people remember watching the
Right.
NFL 30 years ago and see it. It's also cool on the business side. People see, oh, here's what the founder was thinking about here. Here's what they execute, and they came on. So anyway, appreciate you getting that rolling. And this was, I'm sure, insightful for a lot of people.
Thank you for having me, and happy to come on. And when we are a year down the road and it's all different,
Yeah.
and we can talk, how we got